Hello and welcome to The Locker Room, where women talk about sports. Today, Kelly and I have a great show lined up.
We're going to be talking to Nicole Haase, who was at the
The U.S. is not the whole world, Kelly. I know some Americans find that hard to believe.
It was at the World Championship hockey match when the U.S. won after striking last week.
It was a really big deal and a really cool story, and I'm looking forward to talking about that later on. But first, let's start with a bit of a news story here. Senator Dianne Feinstein introduced a bill that would help young athletes be protected from abuse. In particular, it would stop an issue that we talked a few weeks ago with Nancy Hogshead McCarr about the widespread sexual abuse of female athletes and how to stop that. And one of the issues was, if you remember, Kelly, that organizations have no federal duty to file abuse complaints against coaches. So I guess this bill would provide that.
It sounds like it'll have the same standard then that, teachers and schools and any program connected to a school currently has, which is that there is like a reporting duty. I forget the technical term, but basically if you suspect anything, you're like obligated to do something about it. It also, though, would have stricter oversight, require the national governing bodies to have stricter oversight of anything they license or affiliate.
Right.
It's supposed to stop coaches from being able to move from club to club, without anyone knowing about the previous complaints.
And that's typically the big issue in sexual abuse cases, is that the coach, as soon as a complaint comes against a coach, instead of dealing with the sexual abuse claim, that the organization will just send the coach to another state. And so this bill would stop that kind of thing from happening.
Ideally. That's what it's supposed to do.
Ideally. So good luck to her with that bill. And also in the news, we have the Irish national football, or for us in North America, soccer team. Recently,
wait, do you guys call it soccer too?
We call it soccer too here in Canada.
What? Okay.
I know. Sometimes we use the British terms. Sometimes we use your American terms. So the Irish national team in that sport took a stand and won. What happened there, Kelly?
They held a press conference last week. They publicly aired all their grievances, which were insane. I mean, I think you can detail some of them, but they were like, we don't even get our own uniforms. We don't have like gyms, and they said they were going to not play their friendly match against Slovakia this Monday unless these concerns were addressed. And then they reached a deal and they played their game yesterday, and everyone pretty much considers it a victory, though it was kind of insane that they had to ask for some of the things.
Yeah, some of the terms of the deal. I mean, sometimes they were getting changed in public change rooms. They didn't have even change rooms at the facilities. The one thing that caught my attention was that they didn't own their own team kit. They sent it off to be washed and another team wore it. I mean, that seems crazy to me.
Things are better now, and they're going to get being paid £300 a match. So
that's pretty good. And I understand they got a bonus structure too. So when they're successful, they will also get paid a bonus. So that's great. And the entire story is now up on Wisp Sports. Chris Stafford recently interviewed team member Megan Campbell. And I guess she's a defensive player. She's on the national team. She plays professionally for Manchester City. So a great player and a great interview. And that is on the front page right now at Wisp Sports. And Kelly, I understand that you shockingly have a gripe for us this week.
And it's triathlon related, shockingly.
Triathlon related. Well, you are in your first year as a professional triathlete, so something tells me we're going to have a whole year full of amazing gripes.
Gripes about how we can fix professional triathlon. So I had my first race and it was fine. I was in the middle, whatever. But it became very clear, something that I knew statistically became very clear, or I had already known by the numbers on paper. On the course, the guys who are the same ability as me, who are also in the middle, have way more guys around them. There are a lot more guys at the back end of the pro field. The back end of the women's pro field is pretty empty. But then you look at the top of the women's age group field, and they're better than the top of the men's. Like, we know that fewer of the best female age groupers move up to the pro field. We know this when we look at the numbers. We know this anecdotally. We know this when we go to races. We know this. And when you talk to them, because I know all these girls, when you talk to them, there are a couple of reasons why. And one of them is women always are well, I'm not good enough. I would be in last. People are going to make fun of me. I would never be able to do it.
So these
whereas the
are,
guys,
sorry, just for clarity here, these are the amateur women not wanting to
the
step up to the
amateur women
professional level.
don't want to step up to the professional level
Okay.
at higher rates than the amateur men who are equally good. And when you talk to them, it's often because they have a lot of self-doubt. Whereas when you talk to the amateur men who are the same ability or not even as good, they're like, I'm going to be amazing. Get out of my way.
Right.
Which is awesome. But then the other issue that's one of the reasons we don't have women moving up. The other reason is I know for a fact there are a lot of coaches that tell their age group girls not to move up.
Right.
Partially because they know they won't have anyone to race against, like, because it's empty, and partially because they don't see other women moving up. And partially they tell the men not to move up, and the men are like, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway, right? Like, there's all kinds of things.
Right. And also in the men's field, like you say, there are a lot more men there. So for an age group man, wins his age group, say, he's the best amateur around his city or whatever. He moves up to the pro field, and every other best guy from his club moves up to the pro field, and a crowd attracts a crowd, and they have a race. Whereas if the women don't move up, there's no real kind of second tier race in the pro women.
Yeah, and it has gotten better. There is more than there used to be, I think. But I do think this is like an overall problem for the female development of the sport. And I think it's applicable across other sports too. Obviously, other sports don't have the same upgrade system that we have in triathlon, but you see similar things in cycling. You see similar things when you do have to make like jumps to national teams or to whatever the next level is in like soccer or hockey or, whatever. Mm-hmm. All these kinds of societal factors coupled with like personal, emotional factors coupled with lots, like women often have more reasons. They like often are like, I have kids, I need to be. And all of that combines. And then we get in this cycle, and then nothing can break the cycle unless we like all agree to break the cycle together, right?
Right. Absolutely. And in some ways it's connected to what we're talking about today with teams striking and trying to get better deals at the professional level, because as well, if the deals at professional level aren't as good, then girls and women will be less likely to try to move up to a professional sport if they're not being paid. I mean, if you're a talented person, like, why not become a chiropractor or a dentist? You're probably better
or a
off.
lawyer or a lawyer.
Or a journalist, right?
Right. So that's my gripe. I mean, this is not a new gripe. It's been my gripe for a long time, but it was illuminated recently.
It's a good gripe. And on top of it, we have some secret plans to maybe do something about it when we have some time.
As we talk in our interview later today, we're just going to have to make 500 phone calls to all the top female athletes. It's going to be great.
So we also have a hype. Our hypes often come from other countries. We like to cheer when when foreign countries do the right thing. Morocco has a surf competition called the Agadir Open, and it just opened its doors to women for the first time.
There's been apparently a big increase in female Muslim surfers in North Africa and the Middle East, and so they got their own competition, and it went pretty well. I saw pictures; it looked cool. Good job.
Yeah, that's our hype. So let's talk a little bit now about the issues with hockey. As we said earlier, the U.S. women's team recently won the World Championship against Canada, unfortunately. But if we had to take second place to someone, I wanted it to be the U.S. team because they did threaten to strike the World Championships and won against their federation. It sounds like they've been in negotiations or trying to get attention over some issues for a really long time. So what's happening with the hockey?
Yeah, so the U.S. women's national team threatened to strike for the World Championships. They said, we are not going to play the World Championships, which is a very big deal because they were the defending world champions. They are very, very good, right? I
read that they won 6 out of 8
they win a lot, right?
And I'm willing to bet Canada won the other 2.
Yes, they did. So if the U.S. doesn't show up, it's kind of a big deal. And it's also a big deal for the individual players. Like, they're putting a lot of their earning potential on the table.
Right. I think that's a really big point that can't be missed is how risky it is when this is in this year, when you're not in an Olympic cycle, that World Championships is your main tournament for the year. It's a big risk to boycott.
But it got them a lot of publicity. So they said they were going to strike, or they said they were striking unless, certain issues were met. And they had a pretty long list. They were like, we are only getting paid $6,000 a year during an Olympic year. And that's it. Like, that's the amount they were making from you, which is crazy because they were still expected to, come to training camps, be fit, play games. They weren't getting paid the same amount of like per diems, like the amount for meals that the men were. The men were flying in business class. They were flying in coach. They weren't getting to bring a guest and the men were getting to bring a guest. Like there was all kinds of like stuff that was just like, why?
Oh, strange inequalities.
Yeah. So they had a whole list and US Hockey tried to go to a scab team and get, B team people or people who, former players, retired players, juniors players, college players, and no one said yes. Like, and that's maybe one person like thought about it, but they had nobody that they could put on the ice. And they were apparently going, at least one person who was contacted said that they essentially play in a beer league now on the weekends and got contacted by US Hockey.
US Hockey dug deep to try to get out of this negotiation, and it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Which is, again, amazing, and the level of organization on that to have that many people on board when US Hockey's digging that deep and making that many phone calls to find replacements for their national team. So I'm really curious to find out how that all went down. So we have a guest today coming on. Kelly, tell us a bit about Nicole.
All right. So Nicole Haase is a hockey reporter. She lives in Milwaukee, and covers, college hockey and the women's hockey, professional hockey up there. And she was covering the World Championships. She was covering the U.S. team, FYI, but she was covering the World Championships and covered the whole strike. And so she's here to tell us kind of all the behind the scenes of how it went down and what we need to know. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining us today. You're in Wisconsin, so you must be pretty excited about the hockey win.
Yeah, I was there for all, 9 days of the tournament. So I covered it from start to finish.
And what was the response? We hear a lot of people don't want to watch women's hockey. People don't care. Were the crowds empty? What was it like?
Sadly for some of the noon games against, say like Czech Republic and Switzerland, there weren't a lot of fans there, but for the Canadian games and then of course the U.S. games and the games against each other, it was absolutely packed. For the gold medal game, they sold like 400 standing room tickets above and beyond capacity. So absolutely, I think there was interest and people were excited to be there and just really excited to see what they had accomplished. And I think, they made fans off the ice with what they did, and then they proved themselves on the ice. And I think they converted quite a few people to hockey fans last week.
That's good to hear. I know, obviously, when the U.S. women called a strike going into the World Championship, and a lot of critics said, they don't have the fans, they don't have the revenue, they don't make money to, be worth the amount that they were demanding. Why did the women feel they needed to strike, and what were some of the examples of their unfair treatment that, you saw?
So I'd say, a third of it was about compensation, which just is that they weren't getting supported through the full 4-year cycle. So they play a World Championships every year, except for the Olympic year. They play a tournament called Four Nations, but they were only getting like a stipend when they were centralized heading into any Olympics, which is about 6 months where they go into full day in and day out camp. And so they were saying, I need to be at world-class levels for at least 2 tournaments a year. I need to be at a world-class level before I walk into centralization, but I'm supposed to do that all on my own without sort of any compensation or support. So most of them have other jobs
right.
and have to support themselves. So some of it was about compensation. I'd say another third was about development. The USA Hockey doesn't have a very in-depth development program for women's and girls hockey. We were playing last week at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, which is home of the men's developmental program, which is really intense and really well done and has a long history of being successful. And that admittedly is supported by money from the NHL. But the money that the NHL gives USA Hockey isn't earmarked. They don't say you have to use it only for boys' development. So they're getting this money and only spending it on boys and male development. And if you had gone in USA Hockey Arena 2 weeks before the tournament, there would have been a bunch of banners hanging touting all the successes of the men's team and none touting the successes of the women's team.
And the women are pretty successful, is my understanding, right?
Yeah. The women are probably, the women in the sledge hockey team are the 2 most successful programs at USA Hockey. So they were asking, for if you want a world-class women's senior program, then you have to invest in the youth programs and the development programs. And the U18 women have been very successful, but you sort of have to start before that. We really in the U.S. Rely on college and even down to high school and like prep schools as the development squad. I mean, the NCAA right now is the biggest development program for internationally for women's hockey. So they were asking, USA Hockey to put in the type of effort and really money to developing girls hockey as they have, on the boys side, so that they're looking towards the future of women's hockey and sort of beyond themselves. So, and then the rest of it was just about equal treatment. Things like the women being flown in coach while the men were being flown in business or first class. The men were being allowed to bring someone with them, and USA Hockey would pay for it, but the women weren't.
They were literally getting different amounts that they could spend on meals each day, right? I mean, that's crazy stuff.
Right, yeah. And like somebody said to me that they used the term sort of microaggressions. And I feel like that is apt here without stepping on any toes. But it's just everything that the men had, the women had something that was not comparable. So they rolled out a jersey and they put all the medals on there that the men had won, but didn't put the women's gold medal year. And they didn't invite any of the women to the rollout. So, it was a USA Hockey jersey, but there were only men's USA Hockey. The women didn't even know it was happening. They found out about it on the media, same as anybody else. So just on down the line, you can look at facilities and compensation and, like you said, per diem, just really every little thing where the men were getting things that the women were not. And they finally just got fed up. And it's not as though this was like a spur of the moment decision. The negotiations for this have been going on 12 to 14 months.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask about is how did the team organize themselves? I mean, how did they get so many people on the same page to agree to this boycott?
Honestly, it was pretty grassroots. I mean, it was a few of the members. Captain Megan Duggan talked about making like 400, 500 phone calls. I mean, she was super, involved in making sure that everybody was on the same page when they were ready to go public with this boycott the day before. She was talking not just senior team members and not just player pool members, but for some of the younger women, talking to their parents to make sure that they understood what was at stake, what they were doing, why they were doing it, and making sure that everybody was on the same page and wanted to be together on this. So they were really on the team themselves. Jocelyn Lamoureux also made a ton of phone calls. So there are a couple women that at the core were sort of the base for it, but I think they were all really on board just because they were so fed up with being ignored for so long and for this just dragging on. There was a point where they had come to the table and everybody had agreed to something. And when USA Hockey's smaller board took it back, they have like a 92 person board of directors, this very large board. When it went back to them, they rejected it. So the women, everybody left that meeting thinking everything was going to be good. And then it got rejected again. And I think at some point it's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
The 92-person board is mostly men too, is my understanding.
I think there's 15 women.
One of the more impressive things, though, too, was that when the women did threaten the strike and then USA Hockey decided they were going to get scabs, they went to, the B team, they went to juniors players, they went to former people they had cut, and no one said yes. Behind the scenes, how did that happen? How do you get everyone on board?
It's the same way that they got the team and the players on board. It was all grassroots. It was, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. It's not just about us. It's not just for us to get a paycheck. This is for everybody out there. And so I think they just use their network of when you're talking about the NCAA, there's multiple girls on the team that have connections at different schools. And there might be players on those collegiate teams that have been in the player pool or might have not made this current team, but are connected to the players. So then those girls are now the spokespeople on their college teams, or they're at maybe at a prep school like Shattuck or something like that. So they're spreading that word. So when they had both the senior team and the U18s and their player pool, that's a wide network of women to be able to spread the word and say, like, this is what we're doing. And if you have any questions, please ask them. And if you have any concerns, voice them. And they were really upfront about what it is they were trying to accomplish and why everybody should be with them. And I mean, it was pretty clear that they were correct in what they were saying. So I don't think it was hard to convince people to be involved and to stay strong.
Nicole, my understanding is that the final deal that everyone agreed in came in right at the wire. So what are the details of that deal, and what was the atmosphere like for the team right before the tournament started?
They actually haven't released a ton of the details. There's a USA Hockey Foundation, and one of the agreements was to have a member of that foundation, a woman, going to keep an eye on all development. She's going to work with them for marketing. She's going to work with them for fundraising and getting money, and really be focused just on women's and girls hockey development. I think it's hard. I mean, I have to work with USA Hockey, and in the end, they came to the table too. So you don't want to be like too salty about the whole thing, but I think it was clear in all this that USA Hockey, their communications and their PR did not do very well, especially I think in comparison to how well the women handled their social presence and their own PR and marketed themselves. I thought there was a pretty stark contrast there. But one of the things the ladies have asked for is more publicity, you know?
They got a lot of publicity from this, so it seems like people are willing to pay attention. Do you think this can serve as a model then for other sports? Obviously, there's a lot of women's sports teams that have issues, you know, negotiations, contracts up for debate. Could this be a model?
Yeah, absolutely. I said immediately afterwards that I thought that would be the lasting impact of this. And then we immediately saw Football Ireland, the women, demanding better treatment. And I don't think it's a coincidence, the timing of that, because the hockey team sort of created a blueprint and said, like, this is possible. And so, I mean, I know we're talking about women's sports, but I think that it shows for anybody that doesn't feel like they have agency over themselves or their contract that they do, and that there is recourse for them, and they pretty much created a blueprint. I imagine that in future sports business marketing and PR classes, we'll be talking about this, the way that this was handled on both sides, as do's and don'ts for how to do something like this in the future. And I think that the women really created a really gorgeous test case for what can be successful.
Yeah, they absolutely did. I agree, Nicole. And as a Canadian, I said to Kelly earlier, it's the first time that I've ever cheered a U.S. hockey team winning over our team. It was so exciting just to see them have that outcome after everything they went through.
Absolutely. I think someone asked earlier what the mood was. I mean, the women got a short amount of time. Normally they would do like a week of camp heading into the tournament, and they got about a day and a half. But they had sort of contended that the off-ice fight had really bonded them together and created, you know, this bond that was going to translate to the ice. And I think we all were a little skeptical, and then they hit the ice flying. So I think they were pretty adamant about sort of letting the past be the past and not hold a grudge, and to say, like, we had that fight, we appreciate everyone, but we're here to play this tournament and to win and to show that, you know, what we were fighting for is worthwhile, and that we, you know, when USA Hockey says we can't book a bigger arena or we can't play more games because nobody will come, like, we want to prove that, like, we are worthwhile and people will come, and you just have to put the time and the effort into it. So I think, you know, aside from winning the gold medal, I thought that was a really important thing that they accomplished by capping that arena and by getting the TV ratings that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing. Thank you, Nicole, so much for joining us in the locker room. It was great to get your perspective and the inside scoop on the story. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I thought the most interesting thing she said was the 400 to 500 phone calls that the team captain and maybe one other person made. I mean, can you imagine? First of all, you're talking about the team captain, so that person is spending a lot of their time training for hockey.
Presumably.
Presumably they're a pretty good hockey player. And then making all these phone calls on the side to gather support for their issues. I mean, wow, that's amazing.
I think that's what it takes, is like a core group of people bringing everyone together, because the U.S. women's soccer team had also been fighting a battle for a much, much longer time, and they also reached a deal this past week. And the story is that it kind of took a couple people behind the scenes, late night group text messaging, Google documents, where everybody like changed, made their own edits, like anonymous surveys where they all like tried to decide what they wanted to agree on. And it sounds like if you want to make a strike, a big change happen, you got to coordinate.
Go out there, coordinate, get support. It's amazing what they've done. And that's a soccer team too. Did they recently come to a deal as well?
Their negotiation has been going on for significantly longer. There's been a lot of weird issues, and it's not the same situation at all. Just because U.S. soccer does fund the National Women's Soccer League and pays a lot of their salary, and it's a lot weirder of a labor agreement there.
Yeah.
They also had a no strike clause during Rio, so they couldn't have striked if they had wanted to. Though I don't think they wanted to because it wasn't that bad. They wanted to win. But they did finally reach a deal this past week that still doesn't have them getting paid the equal amount to the men, which was a big topic post World Cup, but it does, double like this base salary. It does put some of the merchandising rights into the hands of the players so they can kind of go out there and see if there is a market for it. It does, the whole development issue that we talked about, that Nicole talked about with women's hockey, it does address some of that in soccer too, because that is like a big concern in a lot of women's sports. Is, if the development isn't there, how are we ever going to have a sport?
Right. And the thing that interests me as well about the hockey deal was that they weren't just going after their pay deal. It was a pay deal. It was a deal to do with development of youth girls hockey. It was about equal treatment, like you mentioned earlier, about the flights and the meals and better facilities. So they weren't just taking care of themselves. They actually were taking care of women's hockey, the development, future development of women's hockey as well. So kudos to them.
It also puts them in a better place.
They also get paid more.
Well, I know. I mean,
they deserve to.
I think the developing the sport puts you in a better, right? That's why the U.S. women's soccer players were also worried about, active development of the up and comers. Because if you don't have that, like your sport just dies out.
Thanks again to Nicole Haase for joining us here in the locker room. At Wisp Sports, we cover all kinds of conversations from the world of women's sports. We have a relatively new rugby podcast called Ruck On, or join pro triathlete Alyssa Godesky and I for the next episode of Iron Women. We have a very special guest there, Mirinda Carfree. The multiple world champion recently announced her pregnancy. So we're going to talk to Rinny, as she's known on that show, or read Kelly's blog, my blog, or of course join the two of us here once again in 2 weeks' time in the locker room.